I work as a traveling nurse, 13-week contracts at rural hospitals, mostly in Appalachia, mostly in the small towns and hollers of eastern Kentucky, where the facilities are understaffed and the communities are so tight-knit that an outsider can live there for a month before anyone stops calling him the new one. My name is Curtis Weber. I am 29 years old. I grew up in Lexington, which is the part of Kentucky with rolling hills and horse farms and a sky wide enough to see weather coming from 50 miles out. Eastern Kentucky is a different world. The mountains are not tall the way western mountains are tall, but they are relentless. Ridge after ridge of forested slopes pressing together with narrow valleys between them, the roads following the creek bottoms because there is nowhere else for a road to go. The hollers, the narrow valleys that branch off the main drainages, are some of the most isolated places in the eastern United States. Some have one road in and the same road out. The tree cover is so dense in summer that driving through certain hollers feels like driving through a green tunnel where the sunlight only reaches the pavement in small broken coins. I had been on a contract at the hospital in Harlan for about 6 weeks when I first heard the story. Harlan County sits deep in the coalfields of Kentucky's southeastern corner. The town is small. The county is large and mostly empty, hollowed out by decades of mine closures and the slow departure of families who followed the work north or west. The people who stayed are rooted in a way that I have not encountered anywhere else. They know the land because the land is all they have ever known, and the stories they carry about these mountains are not folklore to them. They are information. My shifts at the hospital ran from 7 in the evening to 7 in the morning. The work was steady, the staff was small, and the patients were the usual mix of chronic conditions and injuries and the occasional emergency that comes through the doors of a facility serving 25,000 people spread across some of the roughest terrain in the state. I liked the work. I liked the people. And I had grown used to the dark, which is darker in Harlan County than anywhere I have ever been. When the sun goes down in the mountains, it goes down completely. There is no ambient glow, no light pollution, just the dark and the trees and the sound of the creek running somewhere below the road. The hospital had a part-time security guard named Boyd Tackett who worked 3 nights a week. Boyd was in his early 70s, a retired coal miner, built like a man who had spent 35 years underground and carried the proof of it in the slow, careful way he moved through the hallways. He had been born in one of the hollers outside town and had lived in Harlan County his entire life. On slow nights, we would sit in the break room and drink coffee, and Boyd would tell me things about the county if I asked the right questions. He was not a man who volunteered information. He measured his words the way he probably measured his steps in a mine, carefully and with purpose. One night around 2 in the morning, during a long, quiet stretch, I asked Boyd about local legends. I had heard a few since arriving. The usual Appalachian stories, haunted mines, strange lights on the ridges, the feeling of being watched in certain hollers. I asked about them casually, the way someone from Lexington asks, with interest, but no real expectation of hearing anything that would keep me up at night. Boyd was quiet for a moment. He took a long drink of his coffee and set the cup down and looked at the table. He said most of the stories people told about these mountains were just stories, entertainment for long nights, ways to explain the sounds the wind makes coming through the trees and the way the dark plays tricks when you have been staring into it long enough. But he said there was one that was not a story. He said there was something along the Clover Fork Road that the old families in the area had known about for generations. It did not have a proper name. The people in the hollers along Clover Fork just called it the Walker, because that was what it did. It walked the road at night, between the old coal camp at Kettle, where the road dead-ended deep in the mountains, and the bridge at the mouth of the holler, where Clover Fork met the main creek, about 15 miles. It walked that stretch of road in the dark, and it had been doing it for longer than anyone could remember. Boyd said the walker looked like a person walking on the shoulder, tall, dressed in dark clothing, moving at a steady pace in the same direction as traffic, like someone heading home on foot. In Harlan County, where people still walk the roads at night and not every household has a running vehicle, the sight of someone on the shoulder is not unusual. Drivers see the figure in their headlights and assume it is a person, someone whose car broke down, someone walking back from a neighbor's house. Nothing strange about it. He said the problem started when you stopped. The people who saw the walker and drove past without slowing down were fine. They passed it on the road. It stayed on the shoulder. And by the time they checked the mirror, it was gone. But the people who stopped, the ones who pulled over because they thought someone needed help, those were the ones who came back with stories that stayed with them for the rest of their lives. Boyd said when you stopped, the figure stopped too. It did not approach the vehicle. It stood on the shoulder and it turned towards you. And the people who had seen it turn said that what they saw was not a face in any way that made sense. He was careful with how he described it. He said the face had all the features: eyes, nose, mouth, everything in approximately the right place. But the arrangement was off. The eyes were spaced too wide. The mouth extended slightly further than a mouth should. And the expression did not change. It was fixed, locked into one position, the way a finished mask is locked. No small movements, no shifting. None of the constant tiny adjustments that a living face makes every second. It was set like something that had been assembled once and could not be changed. Boyd said every person who had seen the face up close used the same word. They said it was almost right, almost a face, almost human, close enough to fool you from a distance in the dark, but wrong enough to make your body react before your mind caught up. That deep, involuntary recognition that something is not what it appears to be. The kind that makes your skin go cold and your hands grip the wheel and your foot find the gas before you have made a conscious decision to leave. He said the walker did not chase. It did not come after the vehicle. If you drove away, it let you go. But he said the people who stopped and saw the face carried something away from the encounter that did not fade. He said his own uncle stopped for the walker in 1968 and never drove the Clover Fork Road at night again. Lived another 30 years and took a 20-minute detour every single time he needed to go that direction after dark. I listened to all of this with the polite interest of a man who has heard a good campfire story. I had encountered similar legends in other parts of Appalachia. The figure on the road, the phantom hitchhiker, the thing that almost looks like a person. It is a common template in rural folklore. I filed it away with the ghost mines and the ridge lights, and I finished my coffee and went back to work. A few nights later, I was on shift with Nola Creech, the charge nurse. Nola was a practical, no-nonsense woman in her mid-40s who had worked at the hospital for 20 years and ran the night shift with quiet efficiency. She had been born and raised in Harlan County and knew everyone within 30 miles. I mentioned Boyd's story about the walker, expecting her to wave it off. She did not wave it off. She stopped what she was doing and looked at me with an expression I had not seen from her before. Not fear exactly, something closer to recognition. The look of someone hearing a subject come up that they had hoped would not come up. Nola said she grew up in a holler off Clover Fork, rode the school bus down that road every day for 12 years. Her mother and her grandmother both told her about the walker before she was old enough to drive, and they did not tell it as a scary story. They told it as a rule. Do not stop on the Clover Fork Road at night. If you see someone walking, keep driving. Do not slow down. Do not look too long. She said most people in the hollers along Clover Fork followed the rule without thinking about it. It was part of living there, the same way checking for copperheads before you stepped off the porch was part of living there. Not dramatic, not superstitious, just something you did. But her cousin Wesley stopped once, early 2000s. Wesley was driving home from a late shift at the mine and saw what he thought was a man walking the shoulder near the mouth of Hall's Branch, about 8 miles from Kettle. Wesley pulled over because he thought he recognized the jacket. It looked like one his neighbor wore. He figured the man had car trouble and needed a ride. Nola said Wesley stopped the truck and rolled down the window and called out. The figure stopped walking, then it turned. She said Wesley told her the turn was wrong. The figure did not lead with its head the way a person does when they look over their shoulder. The whole body pivoted at once, like something mounted on a post, rotating to face the truck in a single smooth motion that had no human quality to it whatsoever. Wesley said when the figure was facing him, he could see the face in the glow of his headlights. He said it looked like a face that had been assembled by someone who understood the concept, but had never worn one. The features were all present. The eyes, the nose, the mouth, all in approximately the right positions. But the spacing was off. The eyes were a little too far apart. The mouth was a little too wide, and the expression was locked, completely fixed, not blank, not threatening, not anything that had a name, just set, like a product that had been finished and sealed and could not be adjusted. Wesley said the worst part was not the face itself. The worst part was that the figure took one step toward the truck, just one. A single deliberate step off the shoulder and onto the pavement, closing the distance between them by about 3 feet. Then it stopped and stood perfectly still and waited, as if it was testing whether Wesley would stay. Wesley did not stay. He put the truck in gear and drove, and he did not look in the mirror, and he did not slow down until he was inside his own house with the door locked and every light on. Nola said Wesley would not drive the Clover Fork Road after dark for 2 years after that. She said when he finally started again, he drove the entire 15 miles with his eyes locked straight ahead, doing 60 on a road where 40 was pushing it. She said he still drives it that way, More than 20 years later, Nola told me one more thing. She said the walker had been seen in every decade anyone could account for. Her grandmother's generation knew about it. Her mother's generation knew about it. Her generation knew about it. Whatever was on that road had been there for a very long time, and it had not changed, and it had not left, and it was not leaving. She looked at me across the nurses' station and said, "Do not stop on the Clover Fork Road at night." She said it with the same tone she used when she told a patient to take their medication. Not dramatic, not ominous, just practical. I followed the advice for the simple reason that I had no need to drive the Clover Fork Road at night. My commute from the hospital to my rented apartment took me through the center of town. The Clover Fork Road was in the opposite direction. There was no reason for me to be on it after dark. Then my schedule changed. The hospital asked me to pick up extra shifts to cover for a nurse who had gone on leave. One of the new shifts ended at 11 at night instead of 7 in the morning. I agreed. On the first night of the new shift, I drove home the usual way through town and found the main road closed. A waterline break. The detour added 25 minutes to a drive that normally took 10. I was tired, in the way that 12 hours on your feet in a hospital makes you tired. The kind where your body is begging for a couch and your mind is already halfway to sleep. I knew the Clover Fork Road cut through the ridge and came out near a gas station about 5 minutes from my apartment. It would save me 15 minutes. I took it. It was 11:30 at night. The road was dark in a way that only Appalachian Hollow roads are dark. My headlights cut a tunnel through the trees, and beyond that tunnel there was nothing. No street lights, no porch lights, no ambient glow from any direction. The creek ran alongside the road, audible through my cracked window but invisible in the black. The pavement curved with the water, tight turns with no guardrails, the kind of road where you trust that nothing is coming around the blind bend because the alternative is not driving on it at all. About 6 miles from Kettle, on a relatively straight stretch with the creek on my left and a steep wooded slope on my right, my headlights caught a figure on the shoulder, walking in the same direction I was driving. Tall, dark clothing, steady pace. The posture was upright, the stride was regular, and from behind, illuminated by my headlights, it looked exactly like a person walking home. My foot eased off the gas. The instinct was automatic. I am a decent person. I see someone on foot on a dark road in a rural area, and my first thought is to help. Offer a ride. Make sure they are okay. Then I remembered Boyd's voice in the break room, Nola's voice at the nurse's station. Do not stop on the Clover Fork Road at night. I pressed the gas and moved to the left side of the road to pass. As my truck drew alongside the figure, I glanced right. The involuntary glance. Every driver does it when they pass a pedestrian at night. You look because your brain needs to see what you are passing, needs to classify it and file it and move on. The figure was taller than I expected. The clothing was dark, a long coat or jacket that hung past the knees. The arms were at the sides, swinging slightly with the stride, but the swing was wrong. Too even, too regular, like a metronome ticking back and forth with mechanical precision instead of the loose, natural rhythm of a person walking. There was no sway in the hips, no shift of weight, just the arms swinging and the legs moving and the body gliding forward, as if the walking was a performance being executed by something that had studied the mechanics but did not inhabit them. I looked forward. I pressed the gas harder. I was almost past. The figure stopped walking. I saw it in my peripheral vision, the sudden halt of motion on the shoulder, and against every word of advice I had been given, I glanced in the rearview mirror. It had turned, the whole body, all at once. Not a head turn, not a shoulder rotation. The entire figure pivoted in place like something mounted on a bearing, rotating to face the back of my truck in a single fluid motion that had nothing human in it. The face was lit by the red glow of my taillights. I could see it in the mirror for about 2 seconds before the curve of the road carried me out of the line of sight. 2 seconds was enough. The face was almost right. That is the phrase I keep coming back to, and it is the only phrase that fits. The features were there. Eyes, nose, mouth. The basic architecture of a human face arranged in approximately the correct configuration. But the spacing was wrong in exactly the ways Boyd and Nola had described. The eyes were set too wide apart, separated by a distance that was just barely enough to register as incorrect. The mouth was too broad, the corners extending slightly further toward where the ears should have been than any mouth I have ever seen on a living person. And the expression was fixed, not neutral, not menacing, not blank, set, locked into one configuration, like a mask that had been given a single expression to wear and possessed no mechanism to produce another. But the thing that made my hands go numb on the steering wheel, the thing that dropped my stomach through the floor of the truck and filled my chest with a cold that had nothing to do with the temperature. It was the eyes. In the red glow of my taillights, the eyes were reflecting the light back at me. Not the way human eyes catch light, a brief glint, a momentary flash. These eyes held the light. They gathered it and returned it in a steady, even glow, the way an animal's eyes shine in headlights on a country road. But worse. Worse because the face they were set in was shaped like a human face, and the rest of it was trying so hard to look like a person that the eyes were the thing that broke the illusion entirely. They were bright and steady and fixed on me, and they did not blink in the 2 seconds I could see them. I drove. I did not slow down. I took the curves too fast, and the tires squealed on the pavement, and the creak flashed in my headlights as the road bent along the water, and I did not look in the mirror again. I drove the remaining 9 miles to the bridge at the mouth of the holler at a speed that should have put me in the creek on at least 3 of the turns. I did not ease off the gas until I was on the main road with streetlights and other vehicles around me, and the world had edges again. I sat in the parking lot of my apartment complex with the engine running for 10 minutes before I could make my hands release the steering wheel. The next night at the hospital, I told Boyd. He listened without expression, his face as still as it always was when he was taking in information. When I finished, he asked one question. He asked if I stopped. I said no. I said I slowed down, but I did not stop. Boyd nodded once, slowly. He said that was good. He said slowing down was not the same as stopping. The people who had real trouble were the ones who stopped and rolled down the window and tried to make contact. I had not done that. I had passed it and I had driven away, and that was the right thing. But Boyd told me something else. He said his uncle, the one who stopped in 68, started seeing the walker off the Clover Fork Road after his encounter, on the road into town, on the highway outside Ivarts, walking along the railroad tracks behind the high school, always at night, always walking, always heading in the same direction his uncle was traveling. His uncle never stopped for it again. He followed the rule every single time. He drove past without slowing down and without looking. And after about a year, it faded. He stopped seeing it. It went back to wherever it went when it was not walking the Clover Fork Road, or it was always on the Clover Fork Road, and his uncle's mind had just been replaying the encounter in places where it did not belong. Boyd said he did not know which explanation was true. He said it did not matter. The important thing was what his uncle did. He did not stop. He did not look. He did not engage. And eventually it was gone. Boyd looked at me and said, "Do not stop. Whatever you do and wherever you see it, do not stop and do not look at the face again. You already looked once. That was enough. Do not give it a second chance to hold your attention." I talked to Nola too. She listened and nodded and said she was sorry I had to see it. She said it the way you say sorry about a bad diagnosis, with genuine sympathy for something that cannot be taken back. She told me the face stays with you. She said her cousin Wesley still dreamed about it 20 years later. She said it was the kind of thing that sits in the back of your mind and waits for the dark. And when the dark comes, when you are lying in bed at 2 in the morning and the room is quiet and black, the face is there behind your eyelids, assembled wrong, watching you with eyes that hold light they should not be able to hold. She told me not to drive the Clover Fork Road at night again. She said once was enough. She said whatever the walker was, it saw me the same way I saw it. And the best thing I could do was make sure we never saw each other again. I followed the rule. I did not go near the Clover Fork Road after dark. Weeks passed. I drove the main roads home no matter how long the detour was. I did not go near the holler. Then, about 3 weeks after the encounter, I was driving through the town of Harlan itself. Main road, within the town limits. Streetlights on both sides. Houses with lit windows. Other vehicles passing in the opposite direction. It was about 11 at night. I was heading home from a shift. On the sidewalk, at the edge of a streetlight's reach, someone was walking. Tall, dark clothing, steady pace, moving in the same direction I was driving. My hands tightened on the wheel. I watched the figure as I approached. It was on the sidewalk, not the road. It was in town, not in the holler. It could have been anyone, a person heading home on foot, someone out for a late walk. There was nothing inherently wrong about a figure on a sidewalk in a small town at 11 at night. But the stride was too even. The arms swung with that mechanical regularity I recognized in my body before I recognized it in my mind. The posture was rigid and upright in a way that did not shift or sway with the natural motion of walking. I passed the figure without stopping. I kept my eyes forward. I did not check the mirror. I was 2 blocks past before I realized I had been holding my breath the entire time. The following week, on a slow night, I sat in the break room with Boyd and I told him I had seen it in town. Not on the Clover Fork Road, in Harlan, on a sidewalk, under a streetlight. Boyd was quiet for a long time, longer than I had ever seen him sit without speaking. He looked at his coffee, and he turned the cup in his hands, and he did not look up. Then he said what I was afraid he was going to say. He said his uncle saw it off the Clover Fork Road too. After the first encounter, after 68, his uncle started seeing it in other places. The road into town, the highway outside Evarts, the railroad tracks behind the school. Always at night, always walking, always heading in the same direction his uncle was going, as if it knew where he was headed and was going there too. Boyd said his uncle followed the rule every time. He drove past and he did not slow down and he did not look. And eventually, after about a year, it stopped. The sightings faded. The walker went back to its road, or his uncle's mind stopped projecting it onto every dark shoulder and empty sidewalk. Either way, it ended. Boyd looked at me across the table. He said, "Do not stop. Wherever you see it, do not stop. Do not slow down. Do not look at it. You looked once, and that was enough. If you do not give it anything else, it will fade." That is what the families along Clover Fork have always said. It wants a response. It wants you to acknowledge it. If you do not, it loses interest. If you do, it remembers you. He paused. Then he said, "And it has a very long memory." I drove home that night on the main road through town. Windows up, radio on low, eyes locked on the road ahead. The streets were quiet. The streetlights made pools of orange on the pavement. The town was small and sleeping and ordinary in every way that mattered. I did not look at the sidewalks. I did not scan the shoulders. I did not let my eyes drift to the edges of the light where the orange gave way to dark. I drove the speed limit and I watched the center line, and I did not turn my head. I made it home. I locked the door. I turned on every light in the apartment. I sat on the couch and I waited for the sun to come up. And while I waited, I thought about what Boyd said. Do not stop. Do not look. And eventually it fades. I want to believe that. I am choosing to believe that. Boyd's uncle stopped seeing it after a year of discipline, a year of not looking, not stopping, not giving it anything to hold on to. That is the path forward. That is the rule, and the rule is all I have. But I know what the face looked like in the red glow of my taillights on the Clover Fork Road. I know the way the eyes held the light. I know that the face was not something my imagination could build, because my imagination only knows what human looks like. And what I saw was not human. It was almost human. It was close in the way that a well-built copy is close, with everything in roughly the right place, but the precision just slightly off. Just enough that my body knew before my mind did that I was looking at something that was wearing a person the way a person wears a coat, and the fit was not quite right. The word almost is the worst word in the English language. I know that now. Almost is the gap between what something is and what it is pretending to be. And the walker lives in that gap the way a spider lives in a crack in the wall, patient and still and perfectly suited to the narrow, dark space it has chosen. I leave the lights on all night now. I do not sleep until the sun is up. And when I drive home from the hospital after a shift, I take the long way. I will always take the long way. That is the rule. I have 9 weeks left on my contract in Harlan. I will finish it because that is what I do and because the hospital needs the help. And every night I will drive the main roads home, and I will keep my eyes forward, and I will not stop, and I will not look, and I will count the weeks until I can leave Harlan County and put these mountains behind me and drive back to Lexington, where the sky is wide and open, and there is nowhere for anything to walk beside you without being seen. 9 weeks. I can do 9 weeks. I just have to make sure I do not look.